I'm Maya, 31 years old, and 6 weeks ago, at my father's 60th birthday gala, he stood in front of 300 people and called me a failure. Not in those exact words. He was too polished for that. But everyone in that ballroom understood exactly what he meant. Picture it. The Featherstone Hotel in Charleston, South Carolina. Crystal chandeliers throwing gold light across a dance floor packed with developers, bankers, senators' wives, and old money pretending it had always been old. My father, Gordon Whitfield, stood on a small stage in a tuxedo that cost more than my first car, tapping a champagne flute with a fork until the room hushed. He introduced my mother first. The devoted wife. Then my younger brother, Connor, the future of Whitfield Properties, his voice practically vibrating with pride. Then he got to me. And this, he said, gesturing toward my table with the same smile he used to close 9-figure deals, is my daughter, Maya. She's still figuring out what she wants to do with her life. College wasn't really her thing. But we love her anyway. 300 people laughed. Not cruelly, exactly. Politely. The kind of laugh that comes from people who assume the joke must be affectionate because a father would never say something like that about his own child unless it were true. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I stood up, smoothed the front of my dress, and lifted my glass. To 40 years of hard work, Dad, I said, my voice carrying farther than I expected in that quiet room. And to the last night you'll ever get to introduce me like that. Then I set the glass down, untouched, and walked out. Before I go any further, if you've ever been the one your family quietly wrote off, hit that like button, and subscribe if this is your first time here, because I promise you, the way this story ends is worth staying for. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from tonight. Now let me take you back 13 years, to the day my father decided I wasn't worth investing in. The family we looked like. The Whitfields of Charleston. That's how people knew us. My father built Whitfield Properties from a single strip mall into one of the largest private real estate development firms in the Southeast. We had a house on the Battery with a view of the harbor, 2 vacation properties, and a name that opened doors before we even knocked. From the outside, it looked like a fairy tale. From the inside, it was a hierarchy, and I was never anywhere near the top of it. My mother, Diane, was a former debutante who married my father at 23 and spent the next 3 decades perfecting the art of being agreeable. She wasn't cruel to me. She simply never disagreed with my father, including about how he treated me. If he said I was difficult, she nodded along. My brother Connor came 4 years after me, and from the moment he was born, the entire architecture of the family rearranged itself around him. He was the heir, the one who would eventually put his name on the building. I don't think anyone decided this cruelly. It just happened, the way water finds the lowest point without ever being told to. Connor got tutors. I got told to figure it out myself. Connor got a new BMW at 16. I got our old Volvo with the check engine light that never turned off. Connor's mediocre grades were framed as still finding his footing. My honor roll certificates went into a drawer. My father never screamed at me. He was far too controlled for that. He simply had a way of looking through me, like I was a window between him and something more interesting on the other side. The one person who ever looked directly at me was my grandfather, Walter Whitfield Sr., my father's own father, who had started the company from nothing back in the 60s. He used to take me to job sites on Saturday mornings before anyone else was awake, walk me through half-built houses, and quiz me on load-bearing walls and cost projections like I was already his protégé. "You've got the eye for this, Maya," he told me once, standing in the frame of an unfinished kitchen. "More than your brother ever will. Don't let anyone talk you out of that." I didn't know yet how much that sentence would end up costing my father, or how much it would eventually save me. In that family, I learned early how to be quiet, how to be useful without being seen, how to want things without ever saying so out loud. What I didn't know then was that this invisibility would one day become the sharpest tool I owned. The day my future got reassigned. I was 19, a sophomore at the College of Charleston studying finance and urban planning, carrying a 3.9 GPA and a summer internship offer from a regional development firm that I'd fought for on my own. I had a plan. I was going to finish my degree, get licensed, and eventually build something that made my grandfather proud. Then, on a Thursday in October, my father called me into his study. Those calls never meant anything good in our house. He was behind his desk when I walked in, my mother standing beside him with her hand resting on his shoulder in that practiced, supportive way she had. My father didn't look up from his laptop. I felt my stomach drop before he even finished the sentence. "We think it makes more sense for you to take some time off from school," he continued. "Just for now. Once things stabilize, we'll revisit your tuition." My mother added, in that soft, honeyed voice she reserved for delivering bad news, "You're smart, sweetheart, you'll land on your feet no matter what. Connor needs this program to get his footing." I sat there and didn't argue, because I already understood, at 19, that arguing had never once changed anything in that house. But something in me went very quiet and very cold that day. I remember thinking, this is the last time I let someone else decide what I'm worth. I withdrew from school that semester. I told myself it was temporary. It wasn't. What I learned years later, through an offhand comment from a family accountant at a Christmas party, was that there had been more than enough money for both of us. My father simply decided where it would go, and it wasn't toward me. I moved out 3 months later with $1,100 and 2 suitcases. My first apartment was above a dry cleaner in North Charleston, a studio with a window unit that rattled like it wanted to escape the wall. I worked mornings at a coffee shop and afternoons at a small property management company, and at night, I taught myself everything I couldn't afford to learn in a classroom. I didn't call home. I didn't ask for $1. And somewhere in that noisy little apartment, without anyone watching, I started building the life nobody in my family thought I deserved. Building in silence. The property management job turned out to be the best accident of my life. My boss, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Renata Cole, ran a small but respected firm that consulted on distressed real estate deals, the kind of unglamorous work that made unglamorous money. She noticed I stayed late reading zoning reports for fun. "You've got a strange brain for this," she told me one night, only half joking. "Most people your age want to talk about anything but cap rates." She started giving me real responsibility, and I soaked up everything: market analysis, financing structures, the mechanics of how deals actually got built underneath all the polish my father's world was so obsessed with. I took night classes to finish my degree, one course at a time, paying for it myself, for 6 years. By the time I was 26, I had saved enough to start my own firm. I called it Larkspur Advisory, a small consulting practice that helped developers structure and de-risk complicated projects. Just me, a laptop, and a desk I rented by the month. I made one decision early on that mattered more than I understood at the time. I kept my name almost entirely off the business. No public bio, no interviews, no social media tied to Larkspur. Every contract went through my attorney. Every client relationship was handled by my team, never by me directly. People assumed it was strategy, and it was, but it was also self-preservation. I knew exactly what my family would do if they found out I was succeeding. They would find a way to take credit for it, or find a way to undermine it, and I wasn't willing to hand them either option. 3 days later, a lawyer I'd never heard of called me. Her name was Bernadette Ford, and she represented a trust my grandfather had established outside the family estate, 7 years earlier, with explicit instructions that no one else in the family be told. I nearly drove off the road when she told me the number. What my grandfather left behind. The trust held $1.2 million, along with something I hadn't expected, a 15% minority stake in Whitfield Properties itself, quietly carved out of my grandfather's founder's shares years before he died, structured so my father would never see it coming unless someone told him. He was very specific about the conditions, Bernadette told me over the phone. The shares carry limited voting rights on their own, but combined with certain contractual thresholds, they could matter a great deal under the right circumstances. He said you'd understand when the time came. There was a letter too. Bernadette read it to me, and I sat in my car in a grocery store parking lot, gripping the steering wheel, listening to my grandfather's voice for what felt like the last time. "My dear Maya," it began. "I watched what they did to you, and I said nothing for too long, because I was a coward about my own son the same way he's been a coward about you. This is my apology, and it's also my faith in you. Don't use this to destroy anything. Use it to build what's yours. And if the day ever comes when you need leverage, you'll have it. I always believed you were the one who understood what this company actually is. Not the buildings. The people who trust you to build them right. All my love, Grandpa Walter." I used part of that money to expand Larkspur, hiring my first real team, moving into a proper office downtown. The rest I left untouched in the trust, sitting there like a door I hoped I'd never have to walk through. Here's the part of the story that still makes me shake my head. 2 years after my grandfather died, Larkspur Advisory landed one of the largest consulting contracts in its short history, restructuring the financing and risk management for a struggling luxury development on the Charleston waterfront. The developer we saved was a firm called Whitfield Properties. My father's company. Every communication ran through my team. Every meeting was handled by my managing director, a sharp, unflappable man named Preston Ayala who had been with me since year 2. My father never knew the woman who had quietly rescued his company from a catastrophic debt covenant default was the daughter he'd told a ballroom full of people had never amounted to anything. 3 weeks ago, an invitation arrived at my apartment, embossed gold lettering on heavy cream cardstock. "Gordon Whitfield requests the pleasure of your company at his 60th birthday celebration." I almost threw it away. Almost. Then I thought about my grandfather's letter, about 13 years of silence, and I RSVP'd yes, not because I wanted anything to change between us, but because some part of me already suspected exactly what would happen, and I wanted to be there when it did. Walking back into the room. The Featherstone Hotel hadn't changed since the last event I'd been dragged to as a teenager. Same marble lobby, same overpriced valet, same crowd of Charleston old money mingling with new developers hungry to be seen with them. I wore a deep green Grecian gown, my grandmother's sapphire earrings, and shoes I'd bought myself the week I signed my first $1 million contract. Everything on me, I had earned. That mattered more to me than any label ever could. My mother intercepted me at the entrance before I'd even handed off my coat. She'd had work done since I last saw her, but her smile was exactly the same, warm on the surface, appraising underneath. "Maya. You came." She said it like she wasn't sure whether to be pleased or alarmed. "Your father wasn't sure you'd have anything appropriate to wear to something like this." "How thoughtful of him to worry," I said, and walked past her into the ballroom. Inside, 300 guests moved beneath low gold chandeliers, developers, city councilmen, bank executives, the entire economy of Charleston condensed into one glittering room. I recognized faces from my childhood who didn't recognize me at all. Connor swept past at one point with a woman on his arm, deep in conversation about his vision for expanding the company into coastal Georgia, all confidence, very little substance, exactly as I remembered him. I found my table assignment near the kitchen doors, seated with a group of my father's junior associates I'd never met. Not the family table. Not close to it. I wasn't surprised. I simply noted it, the way you note weather before a storm. A server offered me champagne. Across the room, my father caught my eye for half a second, gave a small, dismissive nod, and turned back to a cluster of men in expensive suits. That nod told me everything I needed to know about how this evening was going to go, and I settled into my seat to wait for it. What the walls over here? I've learned that the best information in any room comes from staying quiet and letting people forget you're capable of listening. From my table near the kitchen doors, the acoustics carried far better than anyone at that party realized. My father was holding court near the bar with a silver-haired man I recognized as the regional director of one of Charleston's largest commercial banks. "Larkspur Advisory saved us 2 years ago," I heard my father say, swirling his scotch. "Whoever runs that firm is a genius. Never met them personally, everything goes through their team, but I don't ask too many questions when someone keeps a project like ours from collapsing." The banker leaned in. I've tried for months to get a meeting with their principal. Very private operation. Any idea who's actually behind it? My father shrugged. No idea. Doesn't matter to me as long as the numbers work. I took a slow sip of champagne to keep my face still. My phone buzzed in my clutch. A text from Preston. Whitfield Properties wants to discuss extending our engagement into the Georgia expansion. Bigger contract than the first one. Need your call on whether we move forward. I typed back, I'll have an answer by the end of the week. What my father didn't know, congratulating himself in front of a banker, was that our engagement with his company was up for renewal in 90 days, and if Larkspur walked away, the debt covenants we'd renegotiated for him would revert to their original, harsher terms almost overnight. In commercial real estate, that kind of exposure doesn't just hurt. It can end a company. I hadn't decided what to do about that yet. Part of me wanted to keep the business relationship separate from 13 years of personal history. But watching my father accept praise for a rescue I'd personally engineered, while somewhere in his mind I remained a disappointment, something in my chest started to shift, slow and deliberate, like a key turning in a lock I hadn't realized was still there. The relatives who came prepared. I made my way to the bar for a refill, mostly just to move, to shake off the strange, humming pressure building behind my ribs. That's where my Aunt Pamela found me, my mother's older sister, a woman who had never once in my life asked me a question she actually wanted the answer to. Maya. I almost didn't recognize you. Her eyes did a quick, practiced sweep from my shoes to my earrings. Still up in North Charleston, doing whatever it is you do? Consulting, I said. Real estate finance. Oh, how nice. She said it the way you'd compliment a child's crayon drawing. Are you seeing anyone? Your father mentioned you're still on your own. 31 now, isn't it? Time really does fly. Before I could answer, my Uncle Ray joined us, drink already half gone. Gordon was just saying you've had a rough few years finding your footing. Nothing wrong with that. Not everybody's cut out for the traditional path. I realized, with a cold, clear kind of clarity, exactly what had happened. My father had briefed them. Handed out talking points about his disappointing daughter before I'd even walked through the door. He mentioned you had some kind of difficult period after you left school, Pamela added, dropping her voice like she was sharing something delicate. So brave of you to come tonight, honestly. I appreciate the concern, I said, keeping my voice level, but I'm doing very well. Better than I've ever been. They exchanged a look, the kind that says poor thing doesn't even realize how far she's fallen, and I excused myself before I said something that would have ruined my evening for the wrong reasons. Connor caught me on the terrace a few minutes later, the September air cool against the noise inside. There she is, he said, voice heavy with the particular contempt only a younger sibling can perfect. Come to watch Dad's big moment? Just here for the party, Connor. You've always been jealous of me, he said, like it was an established, uncontested fact. The way you disappeared after the tuition thing. You never got over it. Is that what helps you sleep at night? His jaw tightened. I heard you've got some little consulting company up north. Playing businesswoman. He laughed, short and dismissive. How long before it folds and you come crawling back asking Dad for help? I could have told him then exactly whose company had been quietly keeping his father's empire from collapsing for the past 2 years. I didn't. Some truths need the right stage. Believe whatever helps you feel better about yourself, Connor, I said, and walked back inside. But I promise you, by the end of tonight, you'll wish you'd treated me differently. His laugh followed me through the doors, careless and certain. He had no idea what was coming. None of them did. The lights dimmed and a spotlight swung toward the small stage. My father climbed the steps to applause that had clearly been rehearsed by everyone who wanted to stay on his good side. Thank you, he said, that practiced warmth sliding easily into his voice. 40 years in this business. It's been one hell of a ride. He thanked partners, thanked the bank, thanked God, thanked luck, took credit for decisions other people had made and risks other people had absorbed. Then came the family portion of the evening. "My incredible wife, Diane," he said, and my mother rose, dabbing at her eyes on cue. "And my son, Connor, who's already proving himself the future of this company." Connor stood, soaking in the applause like sunlight. Then my father's eyes found me at my table near the kitchen doors, and something in his expression shifted, something almost playful, and almost cruel. "And of course, my daughter, Maya." The spotlight swung toward me, and I felt every head in that ballroom turn at once. "She's still figuring out what she wants to do with her life. College wasn't really her thing." He paused, letting the moment land. "But hey, she showed up tonight. Maybe she'll find her way eventually." Laughter rippled across the room, the easy, comfortable kind that comes from people who assume a father would never say something like that unless there were real affection buried underneath it. I sat perfectly still until the laughter faded. Then I stood. The room quieted as I rose, 300 pairs of eyes tracking me, some curious, some already bracing for a scene. I picked up my champagne glass slowly. "To 40 years of hard work, Dad," I said, my voice carrying clean through that hushed room. "You taught me a great deal about sacrifice. Mostly whose sacrifices counted, and whose didn't." I let that settle for a moment. "So here's to you. And to the last night you'll ever get to introduce me like that." I set the glass down, untouched, picked up my bag, and walked toward the exit. My heels were the only sound in that enormous room, the entire crowd frozen behind me, trying to process what they'd just witnessed. The daughter who was supposed to sit quietly and take it had just walked out on her own terms, in front of everyone my father had spent his career trying to impress. I was almost to my car when I heard heels clicking fast behind me. "Maya. Maya, stop right there." My mother's voice, sharper than I'd heard it in years. I kept walking. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" She grabbed my arm, spinning me around, her careful composure cracked wide open under the parking lot lights. "You humiliated your father in front of everyone who matters in this city." "I humiliated him?" I looked at her hand until she let go. "I think you have that backwards." My father appeared behind her, his jaw tight, his eyes doing the math of how many guests might be watching from the hotel windows. "Get back inside," he said, low and controlled. "Apologize. Now." "No. This isn't a negotiation, Maya. I'm your father." "You're telling me what, exactly? That I should go back in there and smile while you use me as a punchline in front of 300 people? It was a joke. It was the truth of how you actually see me, and I'm done pretending otherwise." I opened my car door. My father stepped closer. "If you leave right now, you're finished with this family. No support, nothing." I almost laughed at that. "Dad, you cut me off 13 years ago. You just never had the courage to say it out loud." I slid into the driver's seat. "Tonight I'm saying it for both of us." I started the engine and drove away, leaving them standing under the porte-cochere lights, my mother's hand pressed to her mouth, my father watching my taillights disappear down the drive like he genuinely couldn't believe what had just happened. Okay, let me step outside the story for a second. If any part of this feels familiar, if you've ever been the one your family quietly decided wasn't worth the investment, I want you to know I see you. If this is resonating, drop a comment and tell me your story, or just tell me you're here, because knowing I'm not the only one who's lived through this means more than you'd think. And if you want to know what happens next, because trust me, this is only the beginning, make sure you're subscribed and keep watching. What my father discovered over the following weeks would change everything he thought he understood about the daughter he wrote off. The week of whispers. I woke up the morning after the gala feeling lighter than I had in years, but I knew the calm wouldn't last. Families like mine don't just let things go. They manage the story. It started with texts, not from my father, he was far too proud for that, but from cousins and family friends I hadn't spoken to in years, suddenly very concerned about my well-being. "Maya, heard about the party, hope you're okay, your dad says you've been under a lot of stress. Maybe reach out and smooth things over? The narrative was already being written in real time. Poor Maya, unstable, always a little jealous of her brother. Gordon Whitfield, patient father, doing his best with a difficult daughter. I didn't respond to any of it. Then came a more interesting call, a Charleston number I didn't recognize. Ms. Whitfield, this is Todd Bellamy, outside counsel for Whitfield Properties, the voice said, smooth and rehearsed. Your father asked me to reach out and clear the air. There's some, let's say, interesting chatter about your connection to certain business partners of ours. My stomach tightened. What kind of chatter? Oh, nothing concrete. Just someone mentioned seeing you at Larkspur Advisory's offices once. Probably nothing. I went cold. Someone had seen me. I kept my voice even. I'm not sure what you're referring to. Please tell my father I have nothing further to discuss with him. I hung up before he could respond. They were getting closer than I'd realized, and it was time to stop reacting and start deciding. While I fielded concerned texts from Charleston, my father was facing a different reckoning at Whitfield Properties. I learned the details much later, secondhand, the way you learn most things about people who've stopped talking to you directly. He'd walked into what should have been a routine Monday meeting only to find his CFO looking like he'd seen a ghost. We have a problem with Larkspur, the CFO said, sliding a folder across the table. Their engagement is up for renewal, and they haven't responded to our extension request in 3 weeks. So send another offer. Sweeten it if you have to. We've tried twice. Legal keeps saying under review. And sir, no one at this company has ever actually met Larkspur's principal. Every interaction runs through their managing director. It's the most private operation I've dealt with in 20 years. My father sat back, something nagging at him he couldn't quite name yet, the timing, the silence, the sudden absence of a firm that had kept his company from collapsing 2 years earlier. Find out who owns that company, he said. I want a name by Friday. What he didn't know yet was that the name he was looking for was already sitting 3 seats down at his own dinner table for the first 20 years of her life. My mother's phone call. Thursday evening, my phone rang. My mother. I almost let it go to voicemail, but curiosity won. Maya, sweetheart. Honey and sugar, the performance of a lifetime. I've been so worried about you. Have you? Of course. That's what family does. A soft laugh, like we were sharing something private. Listen, about the party, your father feels terrible. He didn't mean it the way it sounded. He gets nervous trying to be funny at these things, you know how he is. He told 300 people I hadn't accomplished anything in 13 years. That's not nerves, Mom, that's an opinion he's held the entire time. She recalibrated smoothly. Why don't you come by this weekend? We could have dinner, just the 4 of us, clear the air, start fresh. Is Dad going to apologize? A hesitation. He wants to move forward. Isn't that what matters? So, no apology. Don't be difficult, Maya, we're trying to help you. Help me now? After 13 years? I let out a short laugh. Mom, you spent my whole childhood making sure I understood I wasn't really the priority in this family. Why the sudden concern? Another pause, longer this time, and when she spoke again, the warmth had drained clean out of her voice. I think we both know there's more going on here than a family disagreement. Whatever you're planning, it would be better for everyone if you just came home and talked it through like adults. No, I said, and hung up. They knew something was happening. They just didn't know yet how much they should be afraid of. The next morning, I drove to Bernadette Ford's office downtown, glass and steel, a view of the harbor, the kind of quiet, expensive calm where serious decisions got made. I assume this is about Whitfield Properties, she said before I'd even sat down. They're trying to find out who owns Larkspur. I nodded. I need to know exactly where I stand. She spread the paperwork across her desk, the Larkspur engagement contract, every renewal clause and exit provision, and beside it, the original trust documents from my grandfather. Your engagement contract includes a standard 60-day termination window. You can end it for any reason, no penalties, no exposure. She tapped the trust papers. And this is completely separate from the Whitfield family estate. Your father has no legal claim to any of it, even if he tried. What did my grandfather say when he set all this up? Bernadette allowed herself a small, sad smile. He said, one day Maya is going to need leverage, and I want her to have it when that day comes. She looked at me over her glasses. He also said, tell her not to be cruel about it. Just be honest. Sometimes the truth does the punishing on its own. I nodded. Honest. I could do honest. The letter. That afternoon, I sat down with Preston in our conference room to talk about the Whitfield engagement. He'd been with me since the beginning, knew everything about my family, knew exactly why my name had never touched a single piece of Larkspur's paperwork. They want to renew for 5 years, he said, scrolling through his tablet. Increased scope, better terms than last time. They're nervous. They should be. I pulled up the risk model on the conference room screen, the numbers we both already understood. If we walk away, their debt covenants revert within 90 days. Their financing partners will start asking questions their balance sheet can't answer. Preston studied the projections. Connor's barely settled into his new role. If this hits while he's still finding his footing, it's not just a bad quarter. It could sink the Georgia expansion entirely. We sat with that for a long moment. It felt strange, holding this much leverage over people who had spent my entire life making sure I felt like I had none. What do you want to do? Preston asked. I'd been turning it over for days, thinking about my grandfather's letter, about revenge versus truth, about the person I actually wanted to be when this was over. Draft the termination notice, I said finally. 60 days, clean, professional. Strategic realignment, that's all they need officially. I paused. But I'm also sending my father a separate letter. Personal. He deserves to know exactly who he's been depending on, and exactly why it's ending. I spent the whole weekend writing that letter. Preston handled the formal notice. I wrote the truth myself, 7 drafts, the first 3 too angry, the next 2 too cold, before landing on something simple and clean. Dad, you told a room full of people I hadn't accomplished anything in 13 years. I want you to know something. The company that pulled Whitfield Properties out of default 2 years ago, Larkspur Advisory, is mine. I built it. I own every share of it. The daughter you called directionless has been holding up a piece of your business for 2 years without you ever knowing her name was attached to it. I'm ending our engagement, not as revenge, but as a boundary. Grandpa left me a trust you never knew existed, because he saw what you couldn't. That I was worth investing in. I built everything else myself, with his faith and without your support. I don't need an apology, and I don't need you to understand. I just need you to know I was never what you said I was. I never was. Maya Elaine Whitfield. I included my full legal name deliberately, Elaine, my grandmother's name, and a copy of Larkspur's incorporation papers listing me as sole owner. I read it 3 times, checking for anger instead of fact, and found none. Just the truth. Sometimes that's the most devastating thing you can hand someone. The phone that wouldn't stop. Monday, 9 a.m., the courier confirmed delivery to Whitfield Properties headquarters. Someone named Carol and Beasley, my father's longtime assistant, signed for it. I remembered her from childhood birthday parties. I sat at my desk and watched my phone. 10:14, a missed call from my father. 10:22, another. 10:40, a missed call from Connor. 10:55, my mother. By 11:30, I had 9 missed calls and 6 texts I hadn't opened. Call me now, my father wrote. What is this, Maya? Call us back immediately, Connor wrote. Maya, this isn't funny, pick up your phone, my mother wrote. I didn't respond to any of them. I had waited 13 years for this moment. They could wait a few hours. At 2 in the afternoon, my assistant knocked on my office door. "Ms. Whitfield, there's a family in the lobby asking to see you. They say it's urgent." They'd driven 3 hours to confront me in person. I straightened my blazer, checked my reflection, and told her to send them to the glass-walled conference room where my whole team could see, though not hear, whatever was about to happen. The meeting. My father, mother, and Connor were already standing near the window when I walked in, staring at a view of Charleston they never expected to see from this angle, my territory, my rules. My father turned first. His face had gone gray. "Maya. What is this?" "Hello, Dad." "Mom." "Connor." I sat at the head of the table, calm, deliberate. "I assume you received my letter." Connor stepped forward, jabbing a finger toward me. "You can't just." "Sit down, Connor. I won't discuss anything with you shouting." He looked to my father, who gave a sharp nod, and they sat. Nobody spoke for a long moment. "This has to be some kind of mistake," my father finally said. "A company like Larkspur, you didn't." "I did." I slid a folder across the table. "Incorporation papers, tax filings, the full client history. 3 years ago your company signed an engagement with mine. You've praised my work at industry dinners for 2 years. You just never knew you were praising me." My mother's face had gone pale. "But you don't even have a degree?" "I finished it, Mom, at night, on my own dime, while you were telling people I lacked direction." Silence settled over the table. My father stared at the papers as though they might rearrange themselves into a version of events he could accept. "Fine," he said finally, his voice strained. "I'm sorry about the party. Can we talk about the contract now? You're sorry because you need something from me. That's not an apology, that's a negotiation tactic." "For God's sake, Maya," Connor snapped, palm hitting the table. "Do you understand what happens if you pull this contract? People lose jobs because of your petty revenge." "It's not revenge. It's a business decision, and it's mine to make." I turned to my father. "The worst part is, I would have kept it running. I wasn't planning any of this until you stood in front of 300 people and called me nothing. You chose this, not me." For one brief moment I thought I saw something shift behind his eyes, something close to understanding. Then it hardened right back into the man I'd always known. "If that's how you want to play this," he said coldly, "you're done with this family. No inheritance, nothing." I almost laughed. "Dad, you cut me off financially when I was 19 years old. What inheritance?" "I have lawyers, Maya. Connections." "On what grounds?" "Every contract is legal. Every dollar in that trust is legally mine, and my attorney happens to be the same one Grandpa used specifically because he knew you'd try something like this someday." I let that land. "He left me a trust and a stake in your own company that you never knew existed, because he knew exactly what kind of son you'd become." My mother gasped softly. My father said nothing at all. I stood. "This meeting is over. If any of you contact me again, I'll release every document showing exactly how this family operated for the last 13 years, and every bit of it is backed up and legal. That would make a very interesting story for the local business press." I opened the door. "Reception will show you out." What happened to Whitfield Properties? I want to pause here for a second. If this story is landing for you, if you've ever had to set a boundary with people who spend years telling you where your worth ended, drop a like, and let me know in the comments whether walking away from family has ever felt like freedom, or grief, or somehow both at once for you. It helps more than you'd think to hear I'm not the only one who's lived through something like this. Now, back to the story. 2 months after Larkspur's engagement officially ended, the consequences went public. I wasn't watching for it, honestly, I was trying to move forward, but in Charleston's business community, bad news travels fast. Whitfield Properties announced a workforce reduction right before the holidays, blaming market conditions in a press release nobody quite believed. Financing partners tightened terms overnight once the covenant protections lapsed. Connor, barely settled into his new role, found himself fielding bored questions about a Georgia expansion that had quietly stalled. My father came out of retirement to help manage the fallout. The golden exit he'd built his 60th birthday around had unraveled within a season. Word spread, not from me, but 300 people had watched him humiliate his daughter at that party, and when they learned that daughter had been quietly propping up his company, the whispers did the rest on their own. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt tired. My grandfather had been right. Sometimes the truth is punishment enough. What my uncle finally told me. A week after that meeting, my uncle Marcus, my father's younger brother, the family's quiet outsider who'd never gone into the business, called me for the first time in almost a decade. I heard what happened at the party, and at the office, he said. There's something you should have been told a long time ago, and I was too much of a coward to say it. I sat down slowly. I'm listening. When your father said the family couldn't afford your tuition and Connor's program both, that wasn't true. There was money set aside specifically for your education, from your grandmother's side, before she passed. Enough to cover 4 years anywhere you wanted to go. His voice cracked slightly. Your father moved it into Connor's program instead, and let you believe there was nothing left. The room seemed to tilt for a moment. Why didn't anyone tell me? Because we were all afraid of him, Marcus said. Your grandfather found out eventually. That's the real reason he set up that trust the way he did. He couldn't get your money back, but he made sure your father could never touch anything else that was yours. I thought of my grandfather's letter. I watched what they did to you. He'd known the whole time. What I built after. 6 months later, I sat in a therapist's office in downtown Charleston, not because I was falling apart, but because I was finally ready to put myself back together, on purpose. You don't seem like someone who needs this, Dr. Alvarez said during our first session. Everyone does, I told her. I'm just finally letting myself admit it. We talked about the years of invisibility, about building an entire career in silence, about the strange, complicated grief of walking away from people who were supposed to love you unconditionally and simply didn't. Outside of therapy, life kept moving forward. Larkspur replaced the Whitfield contract with 3 new clients within a month, more diversified and better aligned with who I actually wanted to work with. Preston got the promotion he'd earned years earlier. I reconnected with Uncle Marcus over dinner, hearing real stories about my grandmother, a woman my father had rarely mentioned. I still keep a framed photo of my grandfather on my desk, and visit his grave every month, which feels strange and healing in equal measure. I did it, Grandpa, I told him one spring morning. I didn't let them decide who I was. What I want you to take from this. So here's what I've learned, if you're looking for the moral of this. Your worth was never determined by a degree, or by what your family decided to say about you at a party. It's determined by what you build when nobody's watching, by who you choose to become when the people who should have counted you in decided to count you out instead. My father thought he was putting me in my place that night. What he actually did was set me free. I don't hate my family, and that's usually the part people struggle to understand. Hate takes energy, and energy is the one thing I'm no longer willing to spend on people who wouldn't spend it on me. I'd rather put it toward work I believe in, and a life that's actually mine. Boundaries were never about revenge. They were about protection, about finally saying, this is where my life starts, and your damage ends. If you've ever been the one your family treated like an afterthought, the one whose success felt threatening instead of worth celebrating, I see you, because I've been you, and I promise there is a whole life waiting on the other side of walking away. Thank you for staying with me through this one. If it meant something to you, hit subscribe, ring the bell so you don't miss the next story, and drop a comment telling me what part of this hit closest to home. And remember, you are not what they said you were. You never were. Until next time, this is Maya, and for the first time in a long time, I'm finally free.